Insidious 5 hits theaters this week, but before we can review that film and talk about Insidious 5, I want to talk about the first Insidious because when that movie came out right away, I was like, boom, instant classic. And even beyond that, I consider Insidious to be James Wan's finest work. And yes, I'm aware James Wan made The Conjuring. Insidious centers on the Lambert family who are besieged by a bevy of paranormal occurrences once their son Dalton sustains an injury that lands him in a multiple month spanning a coma. And while that plot synopsis may not seem the most fresh or revelatory, it is what is done with that plot and within the workings of this film that make Insidious stand out and make it that instant classic I talked about. Because at this time, Paranormal Activity was popping off with a different sequel every single year, and they were making so much money that other studios were going, well, that's just what we're going to do. And so audiences got way too many lackluster, limited effort movies about demons and ghosts. And so you brought in James Wan and Leigh Whannell to shake the subgenre up and to just knock it off its center line. And that's exactly what they did with Insidious. And it feels very, very intentional. Everything about the movie seems like they wanted to take on audience expectations, subgenre tropes, and then deconstruct those elements and then re-engineer them for maximum effect. And I think you get that through the absolute original weirdness of Insidious. And you know you're going to get something fun and different right from the jump because the movie opens up with those opening credits that are in black and white and they're showing little stills that you know are going to be in the movie later. And it all feels like a puzzle that gets the gears of your mind turning, makes you go, well, how does that relate to that? And that seems like a pretty innocuous little image. Is that going to have thematic meaning? Is that a symbol? How does it tie into everything? What is going on? And then this hits. Yeah, that title card hits, the strings are going absolute batshit crazy. And at the same time, it feels very classic horror with that string music, but also feels like something that is bold, innovative, and different. And when you take those elements, classic horror and absolute new, fresh, modern horror, and put them together, that's what you get with Insidious. Now, the talent is not limited to what is behind the camera, but also what is before the lens, with Patrick Wilson as the husband and father, with Rose Byrne as the mother and wife, and then the grandmother portrayed by Barbara Hershey, and then, of course, the iconic scene stealer herself, the star of this film, Lin Shaye.
I don't think bad wiring is the problem here.
What makes these characters so much stronger than the ones portrayed in other films that were coming out at this time is that they do what we would do. Most people watch a haunting movie, a ghost movie, a demon movie, and they go, hell no, wouldn't do that, or I would up and move right then, right there. That's actually what they do in this movie. Even though the movie goes out of its way to stress that they are financially burdened, Renee hasn't worked in a long time, Josh is but a school teacher, they just moved into this nice big home, and now they have to up and move. You know they took a loss on the house, you know they're hurting, but that's what it takes to preserve their family unit and to do the best thing for their children's well-being. They do that. They try to run from the peril, but the peril follows them, and then you insert that iconic quote from Lin Shaye.
It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
Yes, that is right. It turns out it's not the house that is haunted. It is Dalton. That his injury, his coma, has left him vulnerable to some sort of entity that wants to get into his body, and that he's stuck in this coma for so long that he is weakening and dwindling. And then we find out that he's actually within this beast's possession, and that there's a whole other spiritual world that we do not understand, but that one of our characters maybe should, because it turns out Josh has been repressing that in his childhood, he suffered a similar thing to Dalton, that he had a specter that was looming and approaching him, that every time we looked at photos, this being was getting closer and closer to Josh until Lin Shaye's character, Elise, intervened. But he hasn't talked about it ever since. His wife, Renee, is none the wiser, and he's not willing to talk about it. And it explains a lot of his motivations earlier on, where this character we like starts to feel like kind of a cold, distant dick who's refusing to come home on time. All of a sudden you go, I get it. And is it even Josh making these decisions? So there's just such a certain intelligence to things, a certain cleverness to things that we don't get with other paranormal movies. And then you have that further, this barrier between the two planes, the spiritual world and our world here on Earth, where time doesn't work the same in that existence. And there's just so much left to explore to where right away when you saw this movie, you're like, oh, we're getting sequels. And that's a good thing because I have to know more about the further. I have to know more about the rules and relationships with our realm. And I have to know more about these villains because Insidious doesn't just give you one cool villain, it gives you two. And the design and the concept of both is freaking phenomenal. So the first of those villains that I want to talk about is this woman in black, the bride in black, the one that was coming for Josh all those years. What a creepy design. It's a perversion of something innocent, it's perversion of the bridal gown, and the fact that a woman, or what we thought was a woman at this time, was coming for a young boy to take over his person. The design's just great with the veil, with the nasty teeth, and those darkened eyes that you can kind of just barely see as they peer through that veil just lecherously. The nasty gnarled hand with the fingernails. It's just, again, it's a classic design that also feels modern and fun and fresh. And then, of course, Darth Maul himself, who gives us one of the greatest jump scares of all time. Everybody knows that scene. Everybody knows that moment. You know it's coming, and it's so hard not to jolt just a little bit in your seat every single time.
I can still hear that voice.
And they do so much more than just make him look menacing and scary and cool and like Darth Maul. No, his presence is announced every time before you even see him. You hear this creaking kind of like wood effect, which lets you know you need to go ahead and set yourself on some pins and needles because Fit is about to hit the shan. Oh, and of course, the dude loves himself some Tiny Tim, some Tiptoe through the tulips, which complements the overall tone and vibe of this movie oh so well because Tiny Tim was so weird, so a little bit off, a little creepy, if you will, very campy, and again, was Insidious if not those things. Now, upon my most recent watch of this movie, something stood out to me that I had probably noticed before on some level, but had never really delved into fully and absolutely appreciated like I did this time around, and that is the use of color in this movie. I talked about them preempting you about the Darth Maul Demon with that creaking sound. Well, they also preempt you with their use of color, because when the further is not bleeding over, when there are no entities present, everything looks very vivid, it's popping, it's lush color. But anytime one of our characters may be besieged by the bride in black, or they're in the room where Dalton is and he's in a coma and the Darth Maul Demon may be around, all saturation is withdrawn from the film. And you actually get really cool scenes where Elise walks into the room where Dalton has been, and it's all desaturated in the foreground in that room. So you know something bad is in that room, that the planes, that those reality field, and then the further, it's all blending together into one as if the portal is open and you, the audience member, you are not safe. Things are about to get scary. And sure enough, they do once you glance up. What's really cool is it's not all throughout the house because, again, it's not the house that's haunted. If you look into the background of the scene in the hallway, they actually do a good job of keeping focus to where you can see it is still very colorful and vibrant in the hallway. It is just here in the bedroom where everything is about to go down that all the saturation has been pulled away. Just such a really neat way to make you feel like you are getting that blending of two different worlds, that our characters are in danger, and on some unconscious level, you know all of this before it happens, and you know to get tense, and you know to feel a sense of dread. Okay, and if you're not sold yet on Insidious being a badass modern horror classic, let me talk about one more element that I absolutely love, and that is the signature scares. I'm always looking for this in horror movies. I'm all about my iconography and signature scares, not just doing the same old package frights that we're used to and come to expect. And you do not get that with Insidious. Of course, I referred to that iconic jump scare, an all-time great jump scare, but there's so much more than that because, again, we're deconstructing old tropes and we're re-engineering them. So we've all seen an expert come into the house, maybe do a seance, maybe use a Ouija board. We don't do that here. No, we get the desaturated room with some real great ambiance, some great atmosphere, and then at least bust out the gas mask, which just looks haunting and frightening. And you get her in there and she's trying to speak through it, and it kind of makes the sound a little bit more echoey. And then as things start to really go crazy and kooky, she's muttering what she's seeing, and You have Leigh Whannell's character who's just scribbling away, and you get to see his little pad. That's what I'm saying. Everything just keeps adding on. There's layers to everything. They involve a new thing for you to lay your eyes on you've never seen before. You've never seen the expert wearing the gas mask. You've never seen the shadow in the room with the long nails and the weird, like, fluffy feet. You've never heard tiptoe through the tulips because that's such an odd choice at face value, but you put it in there all of a sudden with the little ghost kid dancing, and you get something truly special. And then, as all great horror movies do, you go out with one for the road, one last big scare to pack an oomph that really lasts with the audience and sends them home going, still just a little bit shook. They got me there. What is going to happen next? And you get that because Josh returns from the further with Dalton. He's rescued him from the lair of the lipstick demon, all red face himself. And you think everything is fine. But like I said, all good horror movies, you gotta have a little bit of an nihilistic ending. You have to set up more. You have to make the audience to go, I'm not safe, am I? There is no security. There is no peace because this is no longer Josh. We see that he is desaturated. We see that Elise is talking to him, and then all of a sudden she feels like the hairs are standing on the back of her neck. So what does she do? She takes up her camera, she takes a picture, and Josh goes berserk and attacks her, chokes her dead. That's right, this new iconic standout character is now dead in the very first movie, which takes balls and guts to do. They do it, and the movie's just over, and Josh is nowhere to be seen. And then we see that when she took the picture, it wasn't Josh. Because no longer is the bride in black off in the distance or right behind him. No, taking over Josh. She now stands in his place. In our world, you see Josh, but if you were in the further or a different realm, you would see the bride in black, and that just makes you go, whoa. All right, give me Insidious 2, 3, 4, and 5, which I'll be reviewing later this week. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe because we do all the good booga booga shit here on natemareflix. And I am Nate saying I hope you have a fantastic day. And that's a wrap.